Yes.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to True Disabled Story. My name is Nico, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white man with parted blonde hair, large blue and brown spectacles, and a bright orange t-shirt on, along with a dark headset around my head. I'm seated against a purple wall and some bookcases. This is actually my home office. Like roughly 25% of Americans and 17% of Philadelphians, as well as 20% of the global population, I'm disabled. Whether we look locally, nationally, or globally, disabled communities are full of dynamic, diverse, and frankly delightful people with their own stories to tell. All we have to do is listen. As many of you know, I was born with my disability. I've never known what it's like to not be disabled, and I probably always will be disabled. I don't really think there's a cure coming down anytime soon. So I'm naturally curious when I meet other disabled people in my journeys and in my work about their experiences, their diagnoses, and their perspectives. I'm so honored today to be joined by my new friend Erin, who will tell us all about her disabled experience. Hi, Erin. How are you doing?
Hi, Nico. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you. I am a disability inclusion consultant. I am a short, blonde haired Black female wearing blue tinted glasses. My pronouns are she and her, and I self identify as a limb difference individual, also known as an above the knee amputee. I am as well at home, and so I am sitting in my living room. So my background are pictures of my family, and different memorabilia's. I'm wearing a white singlet, and I am located in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
You, Erin. I know that we haven't much known each other outside of this project. So, what was your path to diagnosis like, or tell us more about your disabled experience? Did anything especially surprise you, or was this diagnosis something you were actively pursuing? I'm eager to know more.
Thank you. So my diagnosis, it came as a very much surprise. So my mother, at the age of 17, she had passed from lupus. And I didn't really know much about lupus, but at that time, she was diagnosed maybe from I was like 9. And so by the time I was 17, she had passed. But it was during her journey with her diagnosis that helped me with my diagnosis when I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, stage 4, in my left leg. So I've always been an athlete. I was in university. I was the SGA president, the university queen, and NAACP treasurer. I was a young mother, and I played sports. I played volleyball, track and field. I was a certified lifeguard, and I just loved movement. I came home one summer. No, I actually had a fall while I was at the university, and they said that it had fractured my knee, put me on braces to allow it to heal. I'll have to do some rehab, and we're good to go. Well, it didn't exactly happen like that. I did the rehab, I got off the brace, and I went back to seemingly all of the activities I was doing. And I came home to the Bahamas for an Easter break. And while I was doing some housework, I was mopping the floor. I took a break because in the Bahamas it is very hot, and I was sweating. And I said, let me take a break. I got up. I went to stand up to continue mopping, and I just fell to the floor. I figured it was just me slipping on some water, and which was all of my years of doing housework. Never have I slipped on water. And so a week later, though, I still couldn't put any weight on the leg itself. I barely could have stand up. So I decided to go to the doctor, to an orthopedic doctor, to find out what's going on. We did the x-rays. Straight from the x-rays, straight from the x-rays. I saw the look on his face and he immediately sent me for an MRI. After the MRI, no, it was a CAT scan and then an MRI. After looking at that, he immediately told me I needed to go to Florida to see a specialist. At that time, he didn't say what it was. I just figured that I hurt myself so bad that I needed to go abroad for surgery. In the Bahamas, we don't have all of the latest technology or the specialists available to us, so we would have to travel. And so I went. At the time, my son, who is now 21, was about 6 months old. And I went to all the specialists, and they were just asking me very weird questions. How do you feel? Have you had a loss of appetite? And they were x-raying everywhere else but my leg. And I thought that was so strange. I was like, I care about my leg, but nobody's x-raying the actual leg. So after they have completed the tests and the blood works, they say to me that they would like to do a biopsy, which is this really big needle that they now have to punch into the area. And then they cast my leg from my toe to my hip on my left side because they were afraid that the bone, it had not broken, it was fractured, that they didn't want it to break. And so that's what they did. They cast me up. I went back to the Bahamas because I was still on break, and I waited for the call. I got the call and they told me that I had stage 4 osteosarcoma and I needed to start treatment right away. Now, at that time, I thought that osteosarcoma or chemotherapy or anything like that, I thought it was a pill. I thought it was something they were going to write me a script and I was just going to take it. And they said, no, you have to come back because we cast your leg because the bone that remains is a fingernail thin layer of bone. Which, imagining it, it was, I recall looking at my fingers, and my fingers currently still don't have any fingernails because I'm so active. So I tried to to imagine, what do you mean a fingernail thin layer of bone? I'm still playing volleyball. I'm still running around as a mother. I'm still SGA president. I've been walking on a fingernail thin layer of bone. So they said, yes, it was flexing. And that's why they cast it, because they don't want it to break. Because if it break, then I'm in another area of losing the leg or it's spreading other places. Anyway, returned back to Florida, thinking that I'm just going to be there for a weekend. I had to do intensive chemotherapy for about a year and a half. And everything that was said to maybe go wrong went wrong. I had an allergic reaction to the Neulasta. That is the shot that they give you to increase your white blood cells. I went from, I think she said, 3,000 white blood cells to 300,000 in the period of them giving me the shot that morning and that evening. By that evening, I could not breathe. I had pain in every area. I had pain in places I did not know you could have pain. And it was because it was expanding my bone. And therefore, they had to admit me and get my blood count back down. And I continued doing my treatments. The treatments for me were, like I said, everything they said that may go wrong went wrong. My teeth started to fall out. It inflamed my periodontist disease that I'm prone to as a Black woman. So I'm dealing with that now. I also had black gums. My skin was black. My son, who is the funniest, just used to look at me like, who are you? Because he was 6 months. I missed a few of his birthdays, being in hospital, so I was glad to get out. But when I got out, they said to me after doing the test that it had not spread anywhere else. It was contained, and so they would like to do a replacement. In preparing for the replacement, because I had no insurance, I lost my insurance when I had to withdraw out of university. I had to come up with the funds. So we raised money to come up with the funds. They then called me. No, I then called them to confirm that we're having the surgery for them to tell me it's an amputation. It's not a surgery. And so I immediately was on guard, going through, like I said, with my mom and watching her go from breath to last breath. I just felt like, okay, maybe I'm not getting all of the information. I realized when you're in the cancer journey or any diagnosis journey, you're relying on the information that you're getting. And not all the time, you're not either asking the right questions, they like to say, or they're not giving you the full answers. And so I canceled my surgery and I asked to speak to the doctors to find out how did we get from surgery to amputation. And that's when I got the additional information. It was going to be exploratory surgery. And if they were able to replace the knee, they would. If not, they would have amputated. So I told them, thank you. I would like all of my records, and I left. In leaving, I met the director of osteosarcoma studies for Jackson Memorial Hospital, which is a teaching hospital. And they heard about my case and the fact that I was leaving and returning back to the Bahamas. And he stopped me right while I was heading down the hallway with a pair of crutches, all of my files in between, every open space between the crutches and my body. And the cast leg is still on because I also developed a blood clot. So I had to inject myself daily to get rid of this blood clot. So he stopped me and he asked if I'm Erin Brown. I said yes. He was like, you can't leave. And I was like, well, I kind of have to. I kind of fired. I kind of fired my doctors. And he explained he was the director, and my case they would like to use as a case study for the medical school because it was just so what he called lucky that it had not spread anywhere else in my body. And I said to him, sir, I do believe that I am blessed. The fact that it had not spread, I am still here, and I'm having a conversation with you about possibly getting the amputation because it will be an amputation. And he's like, fair enough, it'll be an amputation. And so I asked, how much was it? Because once again, I don't have any insurance. And he said it would be free. And I cried. And I said to him, can you take the files? Like, you're going to need these. Because I took all of my files and I gave it to the doctor. His name was Dr. Pritchard. And about 6 months later, I had the amputation done. I went into rehab and I just kept moving forward. I knew I needed a leg, but I also knew I did not have insurance. And I was gifted a leg, which allowed me to complete a marathon, to become a para athlete, to now run, cycle, and swim, and now compete in archery. So it pushed me, it led me into my purpose. I am a disability inclusion consultant, now running a nonprofit and a disability-led consultancy business that provides international, global, worldwide, national spaces with disability inclusion strategies. And so I can honestly say if I did not go through what I went through with my mom, and being there through her diagnosis, because that was difficult. Lupus is very difficult to be diagnosed. Watching that, being with her until her last breath at the age of 17, and then having to put on my fighting boots and figuring out, okay, what do I have? What do I have in my resources? What am I looking forward to? What am I fighting for? I would have to say my story may have been very much different if it didn't happen the way that it did.
Thank you so much. That was a very powerful story. And with all of the twists and turns and plot developments, I was hanging on your every word. I was really entranced. I think you're a natural storyteller because one of the first things you told me was that you love movement. And then when you discovered that you had this osteosarcoma, you begin using language like feeling stuck, falling down, being deprived of that movement that you tell me you love. And then, as you discuss more about going through the amputation, getting that prosthetic, being able to move again, it's obvious to see that natural joy. And as you say, you get to go back to running marathons, becoming this para athlete, and continuing to find your life's purpose. Thank you for sharing that story with us.
Thank you so much. And you are so right. I call myself solar powered.
Okay.
And I think it's because I live in the Bahamas and I am the quintessential like island gal you will meet in any island place. But yes, I love movement. I love to move, whether it's indoors, outdoors, meeting new people. So you are so spot on. Thank you for that
Yeah.
acknowledgement. Yeah.
I want to give you probably a wider canvas to paint a better picture. What impact has your diagnosis, or I guess your prosthetic, had on your life? You talk about coming back to your life in the Bahamas, becoming that para athlete. Did you have good support systems? What was that adjustment like for you? Like personally, perhaps professionally? Talk more about that.
Yes. Yes. So returning back to the Bahamas as an amputee, because I left as a non-disabled person, has to this date still a very surreal experience because all of my life growing up, I have always been civically involved and an athlete. My mother and father has always been grassroots ministry and community service. So I grew up fighting for the underdog. And then getting the diagnosis and the amputation, I became the underdog. And so now I returned home, not only as the underdog, but the underdog who did not know anything about this type of journey. I did not know persons like this exist. I didn't know where to go, who to ask. And so I started to just ask simple questions. What is next? What is available? I was fortunate enough that being there and doing the rehab and being provided with a rehab prosthetic. So I came home with a prosthetic on. It wasn't the fancy smancy prosthetic, but it was an hydraulic knee, which allows once my toe dips. So if I'm on an incline and it goes down, the knee engages. Well, I found out returning home we don't have much infrastructures that are level. We don't have even grounds. And I think that lasted maybe about 3 months because I kept falling. And so to preserve my sound leg, what they call the sound leg, the remaining leg, I had to say, okay, I'm just going to go back to crutches and wheelchair until I figure this out. And that's what I did. I went back to crutches and wheelchair. And so for me, the prosthetic didn't really define me. I realized that the loss of, and I use quotation marks when I say loss, of the leg was not a definition or a precursor of the things that I was going to do. Like it did not change my desire, my goals, things that I wanted to do because now I'm using a wheelchair or a pair of crutches. What it did though, it really had me thinking that everything is possible. And I should not look at this as a lack. I should look at this as an adventure, essentially, of figuring out and helping others to do the same. And so I did exactly that. When I found out information, I shared it. When I came back with shrinkers that help after surgery for the limb not to retain any fluid, to promote circulation, I had extras. I shared that. I started a foundation off of no money, but just sharing what I had, as well as the information. And so that then steamrolled into, hold on, I have all of this expertise and knowledge. Why am I sitting home? I need to go out and look for work or see where I can use my skills. And the looking for work was not a pleasant thing. Everyone saw my disability and not my actual expertise. I was great on paper, but showing up, it was oh, okay moment. And so once again, I took that and I said, well, I will become a consultant. I will become a specialist. I started to attract or apply for projects and contracts. They may have came once every blue moon, but that's how I kept active in my area of entertainment, fashion, and beauty. And then I started volunteering. So I started to meet the people in my community. I started to meet the allies, the disability allies, and the persons who they know that they wanted to help, but they might not have known how to. So I started to provide them with additional resources, training, lived experiences. Yes, it's valuable. Lived experiences is valuable. So please, if you have not considered sharing your story, it is time to share your story and your lived experiences. And so that I just kept going. I just kept going. And then I started to look online for certifications and degrees. And my degree was in business administration, but I was like, I am sure they have degrees that I can now garner, certification that I can now garner in disability inclusion or disability strategies or something. And so that's what I did. I went and I started doing those things and providing services. And I met a prosthetist going back and forth from because when your first year of being in remission of cancer, you have to go for monthly and then it's yearly checkups. And so during my monthly checkups, I met a prosthetist. I didn't know he was a prosthetist, but he asked me if I had a leg, and I told him I had a rehab one. And he asked me what my goal was, and I was like, "Well, I'm an athlete. I would like to. There's the marathon coming up. I'd like to participate in the marathon." And he gifted me a leg to complete the marathon. And it, it still blows my mind that I talk to strangers like a lot. And those strangers end up being a part of my journey, a part of me moving forward, because then they become family and then they become a space that I can go to ask questions and get other resources for my community. And so we started a orthopedic prosthetic company here. We help them to start one here in the Bahamas so that other persons can find out how they can get theirs. And so what we my diagnosis and me having to use these adaptive devices now, for many, they look at it as cumbersome or, oh, why me? And I get to take off my leg when I come home. I get to be very free. I have a choice of using a pair of crutches or a wheelchair. I also have to think more now because now when I travel or I'm going to an event, I have to ask about accessible parking, accessible seating, accessible bathrooms. What type of flooring do you have? Is there any elevators? All of these things now kind of come with the package. I asked these questions before. I didn't have to think about those things, but now I have to think about those things. And being a mother, eh, just the whole, am I good enough for my children? All of those things come into play. And once again, I think back to my mom because I remember me and her having those conversations. Because most of the time her muscles wouldn't allow her to move around a lot. And she was an athlete all of her life. She taught me to be an athlete. So her experience helped me and continue to help me as a mother and as an activist and advocate and just as a person with a disability living in the 21st century.
It definitely sounds like you're following in your mother's footsteps and following her legacy and her work. And I'm really
Yeah.
thankful for that. It's great that you noticed in yourself becoming this. resource of information. You became the kind of person that you yourself had needed at an earlier point in your journey, it sounds like. I really appreciate this embellishment of your tale. It adds on really important context. Erin, looking back, or even if you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice at the start of your cancer journey, what advice would you give yourself or someone else facing this osteosarcoma?
Thank you for asking that. And you're absolutely correct. I say to persons now that I am the representation of what I looked for when I was diagnosed, when I received an amputation. And so what I would say to my younger self is we exist. You can live a full and fulfilling life as a person with a disability, no matter what your disability is. It may need to be supported. So you may need to have a support companion, a network, a service dog, equipment, new strategies, new habits, in order for you to be successful. That's the spice of life. The spice of life is the difference. You being different, whether you have a disability or don't. Even non disabled persons are different. That is our spice, that is our value. And so embrace it. And so, and if I can share with you one thing, find your tribe. I wasn't able to find mine in the Bahamas because when I looked around, I didn't see anybody like me. I didn't know anybody in my family like me. I was the first to have osteosarcoma, or at least to be diagnosed with it. I'm sure that my ancestors probably had it, but nobody knew what osteosarcoma was, right? And so find your tribe, believe in yourself and believe yourself. And I say that like this because a lot of times when I say certain things, I'm thinking certain things, persons would look at me like, I don't get it. Like, why do you want to play sports? Like, why do you want to be out there? And it was a personal thing. It was something that I personally wanted, but something that started off as self advocacy spilled over into advocacy for my community. And so believe yourself. Even if nobody else believes you, you're probably ahead of the curve, and that's okay. Continue to show up authentically, and know that your life matters, your voice matters. And as you amplify your voice, your tribe will find you.
That's fantastic, Erin. Thank you for that advice. As we close our time together, I want to ask you a question that I ask everybody that I interview, regardless of actual project. Where can people find you online if you're interested in connecting or building an audience? Or if you want to just share a recent success or a win you've had, or one that you're currently working on. I
Mm-hmm.
just feel like disabled people so rarely get a chance to promote themselves, celebrate themselves. So this is your space, Erin, to be your own cheerleader, step up on your soapbox, and shout out to the world. Let's hear it.
Thank you so much. And you're absolutely right. We don't show up enough. And so may this be an encouragement for you to show up. If anybody would like to contact me, I am online, www.erinbrownconnects.com. You can find me that way. You can even just Google my name, Erin Brown, and put the Bahamas, and exactly what you get, it's me. You'll probably find Erin Bionic Brown. So one of my names is Erin Bionic Brown. It's my athletic name that was given to me by some youngsters when they saw me with my running blade, and they just shouted, "You're half robot! Oh my gosh!" And so Erin Bionic Brown was created. So one of the most recent things that I love to share, because it still blows my mind, I am the first um, in the Bahamas, in the Caribbean, and in our region to become a maritime godmother. In the maritime industry, there are godmothers that are bestowed for cruise ships. When a cruise ship has been built, it is blessed by a godmother. Before, you remember when you used to hear them talking about breaking the bottle on the ship in order to bless a ship to go off? Well, now they have a really huge bottle that I don't have to lift. It automatically breaks the stern on the cruise ship. But it is still a tradition within the maritime industry that the Bahamas now has its first godmother, which is me, Erin Bionic Brown. But I'm also the first Black woman with a disability to be bestowed this honor within the history of the maritime industry. It's Royal Caribbean International. The cruise ship is Odyssey of the Sea. And so persons would see me on board, persons when they come to the Bahamas in the Nassau cruise port, sometimes they would see me at the cruise port, they would reach out to me and say, hey, I'm on your island. Can we meet? Is there anything that we can do? Is there any activities, accessible tourism? So I am literally now pushing more for accessible tourism. I am absolutely ecstatic to be a godmother. When I looked it up, queens, royalty, celebrities, and athletes are godmothers. I am just an island gal who loves the sun, who is just honored to be bestowed this honor, this lifetime honor on top of that. But at the same time, I'm excited to share that with you because if you look on the globe and you spin it and you look for the Bahamas, you're going to see a little specks, right? If you have a really big map and you look for the Bahamas, you're going to see the little specks as well. But they were able to find this one Black disabled woman in the little specks to honor and to represent our community of great trailblazers, history makers, innovators, right in our community. And I want that to be an encouragement to you. Show up authentically because they're watching. Somebody is watching and they're waiting to tell your story and honor you for your commitment of showing up.
Erin Brown, thank you so much. I loved hearing your story, and wherever you go, whatever you do, I can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you again.
Thank you, Nico. And I am going to be following and sharing. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I send you much blessings and wishes across the globe because you have touched the Bahamas this time. Let's see how far we can go.
Hey, thanks. All right. Have a good rest of your day.